All right, my friends, this is a walk and talk down 2nd Avenue in New York City. And holy shit, I haven't seen one of these bad boys in real life up until this moment. Damn. Really looks like some kind of like an Iron Man Batmobile kind of thing. Anyway, Mondays starts the BBNJ PrepCom 1. I'm not here 1 week early for the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, which is starting not this Monday, but next Monday. But I'm actually here for the ocean negotiations. So, yeah, so to bring you all up to speed, BBNJ, you probably heard me talk about it like in previous posts, videos, and everything else. It's what's called the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction. So the UN decided to create a new legally binding instrument, or what is also known as a treaty, on the protection of the biodiversity of the high seas.
This is the Go Maluku podcast.
So this is what we call like the areas beyond national jurisdiction. So whether you're in Tuvalu, Maldives, Madagascar, or in Long Island, when you take a dip in the water, that's probably within the EEZ, like the economic zones of these countries. But if you go beyond that, you go into like international waters, also known as areas beyond national jurisdiction. Before this whole treaty was, came into existence, the protection of biodiversity of the high seas was like patchwork. There was no like universal, like umbrella blanket kind of like governing it. Framework. It was just like everyone did something just to be able to cover something, and that is what the UN decided actually is to come up with something that would be more like an umbrella thing. Therefore the BBNJ. So it like covers like I want to say like 60% of the ocean. Oh, by the way, question. What do you think? Is it ocean or oceans? Let me know. Because that's a huge debate within the UN right now. Whether to refer to the waters as ocean, single, as like one entity or body of water, or oceans, as in like Atlantic Ocean, Pacific Ocean, plural. Let me know what you think. Very curious to hear thoughts about this. Anyway, so it does aim to protect the marine biodiversity, and what the agreement did, and by the agreement, that doesn't mean like the text itself, but what some states did, with the participation of Indigenous peoples, was to make at least like 23 explicit references to Indigenous peoples in the text, and that is huge, into a legally binding treaty that has been been adopted, and it's now on its way for like hopefully universal ratification. So with these 23 references to Indigenous peoples and knowledge and rights, like there's a huge potential in there for us to ensure that nothing happens about us without us. Oh, by the way, about that, nothing about us without us, people might think that it comes from Indigenous peoples, it's not. We use it, we borrow it, but it actually, the first ones that came up with that sentence, I want to say, was the disability movement. So the person with disabilities, they came up with that very well-known sentence, "Nothing about us without us." So I just want to give a huge shout out to the persons with disability movement for bringing that up. Right. So, all right. So BBNJ agreement, negotiated of several years, with some great language on Indigenous peoples' knowledge and rights. And at this point, what do you do with it? And that is the thing, right? Even though you have 23 references to Indigenous peoples, you gotta breathe life into it, and which means that you actually have to keep the pressure on. Not just put the pressure on, but keep the pressure on. And that is the whole reason why I'm here in New York for PrepCom 1. So BBNJ PrepCom 1, what does that all mean? So what the General Assembly decided last year was that there would be 3 preparatory commissions sessions. Sorry, there'll be 1 preparatory commission, and it will have 3 sessions. And member states will participate in it, as well as open to Indigenous peoples, et cetera, et cetera. And the first one, it starts tomorrow, and it will last for 2 weeks. Second one will be in August, and then the third one will be somewhere in 2026. So 3 meetings. The reason why a preparatory commission has been established, because we're actually trying to prepare, hence the word preparatory commission, for the upcoming COP meeting. So you all are aware the UNFCCC, the climate change COP 30 is very hot right now, and that's going to be taking place in Belém, Brazil. And there's the CBD COP, so the Biodiversity COP, which was held in Colombia last year, and the next one will be held in Armenia. Climate COP last year was held in Azerbaijan. Year before that in Dubai. So that's the Conference of Parties. So that's where all these states that signed on to this convention will meet and make decisions. So, for example, COP 30, what it basically means is the 30th meeting of the Conference of Parties, when all these states gather. It's not states, it's party to a convention. So not all member states of the General Assembly are actually also members of all these conventions. So you're only a party to it if you sign on to it. Hence why what we're trying to do right now is for this BBNJ to enter into force. And for the agreement, for the agreement to enter into force, you need 60 countries to ratify it. We're now, if I'm not mistaken, around 20, and the hope is that with PrepCom 1, the third ocean conference that's going to be held in Nice in June will create momentum towards the entry into force, basically the 60 signatures that you need from states that said yes, we're going to ratify this BBNJ agreement. So, and then you have COP 1. However, as you can probably tell, is that there's a lot of decisions that need to be made at that COP 1 meeting. So what this preparatory commission is doing is actually trying to get a head start. Is to try to start to make some, not some decisions, but some preliminary frameworks, some ground rules, something along those lines actually, so that when you get to COP1, so hypothetically that could be in like late 2026, early 2027, then basically it is all about like dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and we're off to the races for COP1, COP2, and the full implementation of the BBNJ. All right, so that is why you have these 3 preparatory commission meetings. So what is going to be decided or discussed at a minimum at this PrepCom is, first like the rules of procedure of these states, not only just the states, but also, for example, indigenous peoples. What can they do? What can they not do? Or observer organizations, NGOs, like all these things will have to be decided, decided at COP1, but prepared actually. The text itself will need to be prepared before that. So that is where this preparatory commission comes in. Then there's like what they call like the institutional side of things. So the agreement, it established a scientific body, like an entity underneath this COP that provides advice on science and technology and knowledge of indigenous peoples and traditional knowledge. And also like there's something to be discussed actually about that when it comes to the membership. So, okay, like are we going to follow the climate change model, where the scientific body has members, states as members, or are we going to follow a more profound and intentional model that actually includes scientists and experts and knowledge holders of indigenous knowledge and traditional knowledge? So like that is what it is set to do for all these guidelines and for participation, and start building these institutional frameworks. And so you have an idea, this is me. So this is not like a voice over AI thing. This is actually me talking, walking through Midtown Manhattan. Back to your regular programming. What the PrepCom cannot do, which is something I'm very aware of, is that it cannot make any binding decisions. Obviously, like the whole idea is to prepare the work for COP1. It can work on the rules of procedure, but it cannot finalize them, put a stamp on it and then say all right, cool, we got this, and let's move on to the next item on the agenda. No, that is what it cannot do. Financial arrangements, resources, all that stuff. So basically what it does is to, like I said, is to get a head start for COP1. So get as many stuff that should be decided over there at COP1. Let's try to get some headway in terms of all these things that needs to be decided. Sorry, that was saying something 3 times over and still saying the same thing or not adding any value. So in COP1, what we expect to be decided will be the formal adoption of the rules of procedure, establishing all these subsidiary bodies, so all these technical bodies and committees under the COP that can help the decision-making process of the COP. So that is the clearinghouse mechanism, that is scientific and technological body, that is finance committee, that is everything that is has the word committee behind it. Then implementation timelines is what is trying to establish at COP1, and also the whole idea is about this network of MPAs, marine protected areas. And for that, obviously, we all have heard the initiative of 30 by 30. I will not get into that. I have some personal reservations on the 30 by 30 from a indigenous rights, indigenous participation perspective. But when you think about like marine protected areas, that is something that indigenous peoples have been like doing, particularly in the Pacific, have been doing like since time immemorial. For example, I'm from Maluku, as you all know, and we have something that is similar, that is part of our culture, part of our identity, called the Sasi. And within the Pacific, you can see the same, but has like different terminology or different words for it, like rahui or tapu or something along those lines. So within the MPA, there's a lot to be discussed, and particularly, so hypothetically, what if the UN decides that certain areas of the world, of the oceans, need to be like marine protected areas, and decides to enforce some kind of like governing structure over it, which could be detrimental to the conservation practices of indigenous peoples of that area that have been actually doing it since our memorial. So like, why would you need like the UN governance over it? Also, the other thing to consider is, what if the UN starts to point out some scientists start to point out like marine protected areas, or that need to be designated as marine protected areas, and these people say like, no, that area should be marine, a MPA, or that area should have a different kind of an MPA. You know, like, so that's a whole discussion that needs to take place, because what the UN obviously is trying to do is to, govern the ABNJ, so areas beyond national jurisdiction. But the thing is, like, the last thing you want to do, particularly when it comes to marine biodiversity, when you take into account indigenous knowledge, is that knowledge is very place-based. And because everything is place-based, you require an approach that is different, like tailored, and not like a one-size-fits-all kind of approach, which the UN usually has a tendency to impose. So that's what we expect from COP1, COP2, and everything else. No, that is a little bit like fast forward, but like, let me like pause and go towards our point in time right now, is that we're here at PrepCon 1, and something that I like to do like a lot is to set the tone with in some negotiating books or manuals, guides, dummies, documents, it'll refer to like first mover advantage or anchoring, whatever you want to call it. But the principle remains the same, is that if you get to be early in the process, you put in the first proposal that is like thought out and socialized in a way, it kind of gets to become the basis for discussion. Have seen it before. That's what the UN usually does. The UN's way of doing it is to look around. other UN bodies that have done something similar, or like, okay, let's copy paste that and then adapt it, tailor it towards the BBNJ. So for example, the CBD, Convention on Biological Diversity, it did something with traditional knowledge. Let's try to copy paste that for the BBNJ. Now, that's all good, like that mindset of trying to be effective with what you have. But there are some opportunities of going a step further or being a little bit more ambitious. And that comes to like the constructive interpretation of these 23 references to indigenous peoples, plus what we've already seen in other UN spaces. And that is something that I think is what PrepCom 1 is a very good platform for, is to start putting out some of these ideas that are not like totally crazy, but actually just part of the UN system already, but not many people are aware of it. So, huge tip is, there's another, these Batmobiles, Cybertruck, that's what it was. I was lost. So that is kind of like lost my train of thought here with the Batmobile, which has a parking ticket. I see right now. Shopping around and always trying to move the needle in a way. And the thing is, that is where like institutional knowledge of like other UN processes is helpful, because with that you can actually start saying like, hey, well, yeah, you're gravitating towards X. However, this particular process, Y, or the Z process, is actually better. And it's also always good to shop around in a way. And even though it might sound, in many cases, very bold, like I have to admit, like in other processes within the UN, when I did propose some kind of a process for like a negotiating process that includes indigenous peoples, like the amount of people, like looks I got of like, this is impossible, particularly from the UN system itself. People within the UN system looking at me like, no, impossible. Like, but then again, like I don't work in the UN system. What I'm trying to do is master it to change it. All right, so that's a little like a 30-minute, 20-minute background of the BBNJ, like context setup. PrepCom 1. So what am I here to do? For the past, I want to say like 3 years within the BBNJ negotiations, and I've been like very grateful that the International Indian Treaty Council gave me had trusted me to lead the IATC in the BBNJ negotiations. We've been putting forward like 3 key objectives. Simple to remember, but it keeps us focused, so that we can actually always refer to those 3 objectives, and which makes our work measurable and also when we do have to make some decisions, when we do have to make some adaptations, then we always have something to fall back on these three objectives. So yeah, objective number one is making the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples the normative framework when it comes to the BBNJ, meaning that everything that has to do with indigenous peoples, like the UN Declaration, will be the minimum standard. So before we had the agreement itself, you had this IGC, or the Intergovernmental Conference, where this was actually negotiated, the preamble, the agreement itself. And with a lot of like support and pressure and lobbying and advocacy, like the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples became like a standalone paragraph in the preamble, which is huge, absolutely huge, inside a legally binding instrument, which hasn't been done before. Not in the UNFCCC, not in the CBD, but now within the BBNJ, you have it. And which could also become an inspiration for example, the plastics treaty that's coming up. At least that's being negotiated at this point. So that's what we meant with like objective number one, making sure that everything that touches or has something to do with indigenous peoples, like the UN Declaration, comes into play. The second thing is the full and effective participation of indigenous peoples in all processes, in all levels, and at all stages. Now, what that means is that, again, it goes back to like nothing about us without us, is to make sure that indigenous peoples are not just like an afterthought, but they can actually like participate as indigenous peoples at the COP, at the SUBSTA, or any committee of the BBNJ. So that is the second objective. Now, how that's eventually translates into key results, that is something that we have to negotiate. But the fact remains that this will be a key objective. And then you have the third objective, which is important. And there's a reason why these three objectives are in this order. And the third one is parity between scientific knowledge and the knowledge of indigenous peoples. Because when you do want ecological or biodiversity challenges to be addressed with science or knowledge of indigenous peoples, then you need to make damn well sure that both are at the same level. And not that indigenous peoples are actually like an afterthought, or the knowledge of indigenous peoples is an afterthought, or anecdotal, or like a footnote as a supplementary thing. So parity also means like equity and equality between scientific knowledge and the knowledge of indigenous peoples. Why in this order? Because you would think that like, let's put like the what front and center. Well, no, because the knowledge of indigenous peoples is not measured or created. It's not even created, by the way. But the knowledge of indigenous peoples, like, it's a whole different thing compared to scientific knowledge. It's not peer reviewed, and we don't actually hold knowledge. Like, we channel it because it's part of our culture, it's part of our identity. Like, it's a collective thing. So the knowledge of Indigenous peoples and scientific knowledge, the parity between the two, that can become like an objective that's not received, but what's the right word? Blackout. Yeah. Anyway, so you get to that. But before that, you need to have like indigenous peoples to be at the table, right? And then for indigenous peoples to be at the table, you need to create this enabling environment for indigenous peoples to be at the table. Hence, the UN Declaration being like the normative framework. So like there's a reason why you have these three key objectives, and there's also a reason why these three key objectives are in that order. So this PrepCom, what we're going to do is actually start to like install these objectives, install these ideas, so that we have a good basis for discussion when we go into PrepCom 2, PrepCom 3, and hopefully, obviously, have it concrete, adopted, signed, sealed, and delivered by COP1. So, like the UN Declaration being the normative framework, that is something that, like I said, is already in preamble, but it also addresses like not only the emerging issues, but also some of these current issues, challenges that indigenous people are facing, which is the conflation of indigenous peoples and local communities. As you all probably know, like when you go through the BBNJ text, there's this traditional phrasing, indigenous peoples and local communities, which is problematic from an indigenous people's perspective, and I will not go deep into that. I think that is like a whole different video. I'm more than willing to shoot at some point, or I could unpack a little bit later on. But that is also like the reason why the UN Declaration needs to be the normative framework. Also, when it comes to marine genetic resources, like there's traditional knowledge of indigenous peoples, and which can only be tapped into with the free, prior, and informed consent of these indigenous peoples. Now, it is very important to note or keep in mind that free, prior, and informed consent is a right that is enshrined in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, but it doesn't apply to local communities. Not that local communities do not, or people in general, need FPIC, free, prior, informed consent, but it is very important that you make these legal arguments, or these legal, the legalities of everything, make them clear, particularly when it comes to indigenous peoples. So that is like when it comes to like the UN Declaration being the normative framework. The second objective is full and effective participation of indigenous peoples, and that is where it becomes interesting, because what indigenous peoples can do right now is participate in meetings that as NGOs, as observers. But like, we are not NGOs, and yeah, maybe we can be observers, but we're definitely not NGOs. Particularly when you're referenced, your knowledge is referenced like at least 20 times into the agreement, then surely it is very important that also the position of indigenous peoples, the status of indigenous peoples within the BBNJ, needs to be distinguished in a way that it has its own in its own right. And that's where the proposal of creating a whole new category for indigenous peoples, for example, which already exists at the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues and the Expert Mechanism on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, to start also creating this IPO category so that indigenous peoples can participate as indigenous peoples organizations, and just so, and in terms of like who gets to be indigenous, that they're using the way that the MRIP Permanent Forum are already doing it. Oh yeah, by the way, in case you haven't noticed already, this is the place where I wanted to head to, and you already see like there's a huge line for that. And I am not a huge fan of lines. I hate lines. So I'm just going to walk past it. But at least I know where it is. Oh, it's moving fast actually. Then again, I gotta find a way to get this bad boy cast. All right, so sidebar. If you know me, you know that I absolutely love pastrami sandwiches. And well, all right, hold on, let me turn around quickly so you have an idea where I am and how long ass this line is. All right, cast delicate. All right. Anyway, like I said, I'm not gonna wait, so I'll walk a little bit more. Yeah, so the IPO category is something that we can create within the BBNJ, because like the supermarket in a way that can make this all happen is already in the preamble. And that is like the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples, being immediately like directly referenced in the preamble. So that is in a way like the supermarket. So even though it's not explicitly in the agreement itself, but there's a hook in the agreement through the reference of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. The thing is, like, you just gotta want to see it, and you gotta want to see it, and like you have to be intentional when you're in these negotiations with the placement, with the recommendations, and everything. So that is why I've been in these negotiations since I want to say 2019. So, and obviously there's like a lot more people that have been, like from the state side, have been on in this for a lot longer. But that's the thing, like it's one thing to be in I have no idea where I am right now, which is so freaking awesome. It's like you're in New York and turn the street and you Korean rice hot dogs, some vintage stuff for sale. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, supermarkets participation, IPO category within the BBNJ. So that is like the one layer of participation that definitely needs to be created. Now the other layer is that there's in the agreement, there's the creation of the scientific and technological body, so which is like the university equivalent of SUPSA. And the agreement says that like it needs to have like scientists as members of this scientific and technological body, but also experts of traditional knowledge. And that is interesting. Because that like opens the door. Holy shit. Oh. Crabs, by the way. Holy crap. Oh, Belgian fries. Oh my god. I'm getting hungry. But I shouldn't. Rice pudding. Oh my god. Keep walking. Yeah. So the fact that we've been able to include in the agreement that like experts of traditional knowledge, and because knowledge holders wasn't like like that was we're unable to secure that into the text. But again, like there's building blocks. So there's it begs the question, who are these people, who are these knowledge holders, and how are they like appointed to these bodies? Now, if you are a conservation organization or an NGO, you'd be like, oh, all right, yeah, let's do it, and let's have like a very democratic process and open and transparent, and by all means it makes sense. But indigenous peoples, like, they have their own processes. So in this case, like, it's not about let's create something new, but let's tap into something that already is there and works. And so, for example, indigenous peoples, when they appoint representatives to the local communities and Indigenous Peoples Platform Facilitated Working Group, is an example. What we included into the decision text at the UNFCCC was self-selection of indigenous peoples, self-nomination process. That is in the decision text. So the thing is that we can also use that for the BBNJ. Tell the BBNJ, like, hey guys, we already have a decision text that you can tap into. So like, it has happened before. It's nothing new. So so there we go. So that is when it comes to, like, this is the second layer. So the first layer of participation is like Indigenous Peoples organizations like ICC, Inuit Circumpolar Council, Alifuru Council, IITC, like all these Indigenous Peoples organizations that they can participate as Indigenous Peoples and not having to participate as an NGO with ECOSOC status. That's the one layer. And the other layer is making sure that Indigenous Peoples, their knowledge holders, get to participate in these, or get to be members, full members of these bodies, these committees, chosen through like indigenous owned processes. And it's not that these indigenous owned processes are because we don't like the UN processes. It is just because they're not calibrated for indigenous peoples. Many indigenous regions, like, they have their own culturally appropriate way of selecting people, nominating people. So like, you gotta respect that. And it's otherwise, yeah, you get to, again, like, you have to like use the UN system, which is incompatible because like the UN has 5 regions, indigenous peoples. They use the 7 indigenous social cultural regions. So like that, and in many other cases, like it's the selection processes or nomination processes that the UN uses, it is not compatible with the process that indigenous peoples use. So that is self-selection and self-nomination, self-representation part of the the knowledge holders. Now the other thing is, and that is like within that same dimension of participation, is also to ensure that indigenous knowledge holders are not only members of the scientific and technological body, but also of these other bodies. You know, it's the area-based management tools. You know, like there's a lot of Indigenous peoples that are experts in their own way, that could have or provide information that this ABMT committee can benefit from. So the thing is then, or the idea, is to mainstream the participation of Indigenous peoples, particularly their knowledge holders, in all committees. And that is also compatible with Article 18 of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, that Indigenous peoples have the right to participate in decision-making processes that may affect them. So the devil is in the details, because the UN Declaration says that may affect them. It doesn't say like that affects them, but it says like that may affect them. So it's up to Indigenous peoples themselves to decide or determine what may affect them. Now, obviously, the main rebuttal of a member state would be like, well, how do you define what may? How are you doing? What does it mean? Like, how do you codify that? What may affect them? But then again, like it goes back to the point of making sure that nothing about us without us. Sorry, I had a small sneeze I had to hold in.
You taking me to a ramen place?
So, in the most ideal case, is that you have a IPO category, and then you also have the knowledge holders as members of all these committees and bodies underneath the COP. Now, the other thing is, what is interesting, is that at COP16 in Colombia, the CBD adopted the 8J subsidiary body. And obviously, a lot of people are interested, like, well, why don't we do that as well under the BBNJ? Now, the problem is that what you don't want within the UN system, particularly like the environmental programs of the UN, is to create a catch-all bucket. That is what we tried to avoid with the local communities and Indigenous Peoples platform under the UNFCCC. So like the UNFCCC, the LCIP, it has the ability to collaborate with entities both under and outside of the convention. So to be very honest, in my opinion, like that is something that hasn't been doing well, or enough of, at least. But the point definitely is that like you do not want the knowledge of Indigenous peoples to be inside of some kind of a catch-all bucket, and put it in there so that it doesn't impact other negotiating streams, or that you put it in there to keep it occupied so that it won't impact other negotiating streams. So and we've seen that already. Like it's a lesson learned from the LCIP implementation of several years right now, and with the CBD 8J subsidiary body, it might be interesting, but it would be much better if you integrate the knowledge holders and as well as the Indigenous peoples like into like the whole machinery of the BBNJ. And then also comes to like the other point is that the agreement by itself right now, it doesn't refer to a subsidiary body for traditional knowledge. It doesn't refer to that, and that might be like a harder sell than like including indigenous peoples and their knowledge holders into like the existing subsidiary bodies. And there might be a time where it becomes interesting to create a new one, but the benchmark will be then already that you have knowledge holders into all these committees under the BBNJ. So that is the consideration, like something that we thought about when we engaged into this whole BBNJ machinery, these negotiations. And then comes also like the final point is parity between the knowledge of indigenous peoples and scientific knowledge. Now, to be very, very honest, like when it comes to participation, like I can go like 1 inch wide and 3 miles deep, no problem. But when it comes to knowledge, not even close. I get like 1 inch wide and probably like 2 inches deep. It's because like I'm not a knowledge holder. And so what I can do is create like this enabling environment so that there is an environment where there's parity between the two, and maybe the outcome could be like towards parity would be some guidelines or something along those lines. Like, I don't know, because I'm not a knowledge holder. Like, so that's where basically like my knowledge and expertise ends, and where the knowledge and expertise of the knowledge holder begins. In a way, like I love to be like more educated by, like for example in the Pacific, there's like lots of knowledge holders that like to think about this as well. But then again, like I said, this order is very important. That normative framework, then you do the participation, and then the knowledge. So, and that is something that will have more like fleshed out by the end of PrepCom 2. I hope, not sure. But the point is that definitely you're about to plant that seed. Now, what I do know is, and this is like something that I've learned from the UNFCCC process, is like there's no like formal entry of knowledge of indigenous peoples, traditional knowledge, into the COP agenda. So I've read a lot of policy briefs for the BBNJ PrepCom 1. And yeah, like there's a lot of these organizations, NGOs, that are interested in, having indigenous peoples being part of the whole subsidiary body machinery. But the COP1 is something that is also interesting to me, because like you want to keep the distance between the distance between the knowledge holders and the decision makers as short as possible. So one thing actually that we want to propose is a standing agenda item at COP, which is, it can be something along the lines of stock take on the health of oceans. I just made that up. The stock take on the health of oceans, and the idea is is to provide like every COP one agenda item where states as well as indigenous peoples as well as conservation organizations can directly address the COP agenda. Now, why is this important? Because at this point, and when you look at the UNFCCC, when you look at the CBD, like indigenous peoples can, no, sorry, I don't know enough about the CBD, definitely UNFCCC, like indigenous peoples, when they can address COP, it's at the beginning and as well as at the end. So basically when everyone has already left the room, left the building, indigenous peoples can do that 3-minute statement in the middle of the night. So the thing is, there should be a agenda item that actually opens it up, that indigenous peoples can participate.
Mami.
All right, I don't know why people are like taking a photo of this. Huh, this is funny. No, not going that way. So, where was I? Yeah, the Senate agenda item at COP. So if you create this permanent agenda item, this formal entry of traditional knowledge, for example, the stocktake of ocean science or ocean health, which opens up the door for like indigenous perspectives, views to be like addressed at the COP level. What you can do, I like what it opens up the door for, is to flip or invert the speakers lineup. So, like I said before, indigenous peoples were speaking as last. How you doing, brother? Yeah, indigenous people speak last. But what if, with this agenda item, you could invert the speakers list and indigenous people speak first? Well, that would be like a very nice thing to establish within the BBNJ COP. And also, like if that becomes a reality, then how about UNFCCC? Well, UNFCCC is easier actually because you have the local communities and indigenous peoples platform. The report of it, however, like it doesn't go anywhere. So like what would be interesting is for that have like formal entry in the COP agenda for this consideration of the report. But that's like a whole. That is when that's what I'll cover when we discuss like the UNFCCC negotiations in Brazil. BBNJ, however, like it does provide this opportunity. Why? Again, because the supermarket is in the preamble. Like the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples is referenced in the preamble. So like those are like the key results. If you have the 3 objectives, and then you have like these like key results underneath it, and then like not even to begin discussing, well, there should be like a voluntary fund. There's a clause for a voluntary fund for SIDS and LDCs into the work of the BBNJ. 100% agree with that. There should also be like a voluntary fund for indigenous peoples to participate in the BBNJ. And again, like it's not something new because there's a voluntary fund for indigenous peoples that already exists. It's like the oldest UN mandate specifically for indigenous peoples within the UN system. Based in Geneva under the Office of High Commissioner on Human Rights. And then there's also a voluntary fund for indigenous peoples under the CBD. So like there's nothing new here. Like you're just basically pointing towards existing clauses, existing modalities, opportunities within the UN system that are just lying and waiting to be copy-pasted, adopted, if you will, into the BBNJ. All right. Oh, this sounds... By the way, no clue where I am right now, but there is a very exciting street market. Whew. Oh, this smells so good. This smells really good. All right. I know you guys cannot smell what I'm smelling. If you smell... Oh my God, I just saw like a giant squid. All right, hang on, I gotta find this. All right, you guys, help me find this squid on a stick. I saw, no shit, I saw a squid on a stick. Grilled holes, holy shit. I shouldn't. All right. Let's keep on walking. The classic New York thing that people say like, hey, I'm walking here, I'm walking here. It's a little bit of like a New York, Brooklyn kind of thing. Oh, what is it, sugar cane? All right. Oh man. Chocolate strawberry. Everything on a stick. Well, there's a lot in there.
What should we try next?
All right, and you guys are probably like looking at like people's backs. So at some point I should either turn around or actually try to provide some, oh my God, Korean fried chicken. Oi. All right. Let's see if there's actually like a grilled lobster on that thing, because that thing was like huge.
No.
All right, sorry. So basically, when it comes to the BBNJ, is that it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to apply like the lessons learned from the UNFCCC context in terms of like traditional knowledge of Indigenous peoples, the deconflation of it, participation of Indigenous peoples, trying to like move the needle. Like it's one thing actually to try and duplicate what's already happening on the CBD just because it's happening at the CBD, and it has the word biodiversity in it. So, oh my God. Holy shit, king squid. All right, I gotta. Dang. Like these guys must have been. All right. Whew. Anyway, before I eat the whole thing, I'm moving out. Woof. All right, I'm out of here. Otherwise, kind of bear. Right, so that's the idea, right? Lessons learned, applying, trying to, but also like I think the one thing that excites me the most is the power of perseverance because some might call it pressure, perseverance might be a better way of describing it, is that for 6 years, like it's to have continuous meetings with member states, show up to these meetings, whether it is in, we had a meeting in, I recall a meeting in Oslo at the Nobel Institute. I recall a meeting in Ottawa when we met at the Canadian Ministry. Like having Monaco even, like when his Prince Albert actually hosted his meeting at the Monaco Yacht Club. Like it's like all these meetings to keep keep drawing these negotiators and states representatives and civil society reps to the necessity of including indigenous peoples, the knowledge, and operationalize it in a way as well. Like so that's the exciting part, is that you get to make something out of nothing just by words, just like we did at the UNFCCC process. At paragraph 135 of the Paris Agreement, it's established this platform on traditional knowledge, and now it becomes part like so. Like, how do you give this like hands and feet? How do you breathe life into this? And believe me, like the first ideas of the platform was, and I have a mental list of indigenous representatives that were fine with making this platform an online database of traditional knowledge. I have a mental list. I'm not going to write it down, but I am fully aware of who these people were in that meeting. I was in a meeting that they were like, no, like just make it a platform, like a database clearinghouse mechanism that is for traditional knowledge. Like, no way. Like, you don't have like formal entry into like the UNFCCC framework. Let's do that first. And you don't want to create like a permanent forum within the UNFCCC, which was like another idea that some people had. But like, instead of like a gathering point, like some kind of hub, catch-all buckets, you want to create a hub, so from here, this point, like you can get to inform some other processes parallel to like the direct influence that these people are doing through the Indigenous Caucus, because that remains. You will always have the Indigenous Caucus under the UNFCCC to like negotiate on behalf of Indigenous peoples in other negotiating streams. That has been there, and it remains. It 100% can be improved, but that is like definitely still like the main, like the main source for negotiations. Now, the same thing within the BBNJ is that like the idea is to not create a catch-all bucket, but streamline. Like make, and maybe that's a punchline in what's not just from why I do what I do within the BBNJ, but in general. It is about making in each participation a fact, like a standard, not like an afterthought or like a nice to have, but like a imperative, as simple and as understood as 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 adamant as that a UN meeting needs to include states, you want to have like and indigenous peoples. Like that is like my mindset in a way. Is that any UN meeting and indigenous peoples. And that doesn't mean, by the way, indigenous peoples organizations. So for example, what I'd like to see is for indigenous peoples, as governments, to participate in these meetings, have a standing at these meetings, have a standing at the UN, doesn't matter which part of it is. I prefer them to have a status because they don't have it yet, versus indigenous peoples organizations because that already exists. But notwithstanding, like we're still trying to do it, and I like mainstream the IPO participatory modality, but the whole thing about indigenous peoples, like as peoples, like that is definitely something a part of my work that is like the undercurrent of it all. Make sure that happens. Right. So you've been following me for like an hour and a half right now. So what I did for PrepCom 1, for the last 2.5 months, I organized digital Zoom meetings. Like Zoom meetings where indigenous peoples could actually comment on, reflect on a policy brief, which was also like a way of training indigenous peoples to how to read or participate in let me walk this way. How to participate in UN negotiations. So like the written contributions, and I had to balance the text and all that stuff. So like it turns out into like a 21-page document that is now being socialized amongst civil society organizations, indigenous peoples, states as well, as like, hey, this is our starting point for the BBNJ PrepCom 1, and we'll fine-tune it. We'll fine-tune it as we move forward in the negotiating process of the BBNJ, going into PrepCom 2 and PrepCom 3, and then hopefully COP 1 we can all say like, all right guys, we did it. Oh, by the way, this is Union Square, so that you have an idea where I am. I'm not gonna say like we made a full circle, but it's almost like a J character. In the distance you'll see the MetLife building, which right in front of it is the Grand Central Station. We are now at 15th Street and Grand Central is at 42nd, so I have to walk all the way up to go to my hotel, which is something that I will do right now. Whoop. Yeah, so the policy brief has been developed, socialized right now, and yeah, that will be the basis of the discussions for PrepCom 1. So that's going to be taking place for the next 2 weeks, full agenda, and obviously the second week of PrepCom 1 will overlap with the first week of Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. So with our friends at the High Seas Alliance, doing some amazing things. First of all, High Seas Alliance is like, as the International Indian Treaty Council is the core sponsor, the main sponsor of this policy brief. High Seas Alliance has adapted its own policy briefs and briefing notes accordingly. So like huge shout out to the High Seas Alliance. What it also did is doing some side events. So There's one side event in the first week of PrepCon 1 targeted at member states, like in terms of like how to operationalize all these references to indigenous peoples in the text. And then in the second week, there's a side event in the margin of the Permanent Forum, which is targeted at indigenous peoples, to like socialize the whole idea of the BBNJ, to bring it up on their radar. Because the BBNJ, that's the funny thing is, it was not on indigenous people's radar until a representative of the Federated States of Micronesia tracked the local communities and indigenous people's platform negotiations and was invited to the Indigenous Caucus and to explain what in the world was going on in the BBNJ. So that's why the BBNJ was at like not even outside of peripherals. It was not even, it was outside of our peripherals. We didn't even see it. But now we do. And now it's also part of like socializing it as much as indigenous peoples are trying to get better understanding of the UNCCD. So like that's the UN Convention to combat desertification. There's also the Plastic Negotiation Treaty, looming treaty on business and human rights. Well, don't get me started on that one. A potential convention on taxation, and there's also there's a lot of things ongoing right now, and the BBNJ we're adding that. Well, I'm adding that to my accordion-like portfolio of UN processes where indigenous participation needs to be established. So that is the BBNJ. Why I'm here in New York, 1 week before the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. And if you have any questions, let me know.
My friends, I hope you enjoyed this. Please consider to subscribe, to comment, and to share this video on your socials.